Okay, hi everybody. We are going to get started. Thank you so much for being with us today. My name is Kyla Hannington, and I'm the Public Outreach and Engagement Division Chief with the Prince George's County Office of Human Rights. We are the county's civil and human rights education and enforcement agency. We do four main things. We investigate complaints of civil rights discrimination. We combat human trafficking. We ensure all people can access county government resources in the language of their preference. And we also have a public outreach and education division that looks to educate and provides opportunities coming together on issues of social justice and human rights importance. We are delighted to be here today, invited by Greenbelt Community Church to co-host this interfaith conversation. And I particularly want to give a shout out to Carol Bellamy, the church moderator whose idea this was and who reached out and asked us to join them today. So tonight's event is small acts of kindness. Such acts are one of the often invisible ways, but ever so important, that we build community and through which we find ourselves a place of peace. Tonight's conversation will be moderated by David Alexander, who partnered us for the last interfaith event we had here, which was last June. So it's great to have David back, and now I'm going to switch and read his bio here. David Alexander grew up in Salem, Oregon, and then went east to Massachusetts for his education with a 5-year detour in the U.S. Navy. He was lured to Greenbelt for a job at the Census Bureau in 1992 and added some graduate work at the University of Maryland College Park. After settling in Greenbelt, he joined the Greenbelt Community Church in 1993, and soon after met and married Greenbelt-born Rachel Trukevich Alexander. They have 2 grown daughters, May Reed and Claire. With academic degrees in planetary science and applied mathematics, David claims he really has no qualifications to be a moderator for a program like this. I'm glad he told us now. But after applying some of his skills gained as a Toastmaster to help organize last year's Interfaith Panel on pilgrimage, he decided to give it a try. We're thrilled to have David. He's fantastic. And today he works as a cloud engineer for Accenture Federal Services. So welcome, David. I'm now going to introduce, I'm going to put this down. There you go. I'm going to introduce our panelists. What I'll do, I'll just go in order of the way they are seated next to David. So first we have Dr. Hemakar Sidhu, who boasts a rich professional background in neuroscience and sleep medicine, spanning academia, research, industry, and clinical practice. Beyond her professional pursuits, she actively engages in interfaith initiatives, serving as a panelist and a speaker in the Parliament of World Religions and various interfaith gatherings. She currently holds a position on the board of the Interfaith Council of Metropolitan Washington and participates in the All Faiths and Friendship Book Group, fostering understanding across religious lines. Dr. Sidhu is also deeply committed to community service, volunteering as a pastor at Howard County General Hospital for a decade, and contributing to disaster drills and bias dialogues in Montgomery County. Additionally, she is a charter member and former president of the Khalsa Toasters International Club and serves as a counselor for the Youth Khalsa Toastmasters Galva Club. Welcome, Dr. Sidhu. Rabbi Saul Areski has served as Mishkan Torah's rabbi since August 2017. He is passionate about Jewish education for students of all ages and has been teaching continuously since he was 16 in area-wide post-bar bat mitzvah programs in religious schools and in tutoring well over 300 B'nai Mitzvah students. He hails from the Washington, D.C. area. Rabbi Saul is a 2013 graduate of the Reconstructionist Rabbinical College in Wyncote, Pennsylvania. He left his federal government job as a technical writer-editor at the Naval Research Laboratory in Washington, D.C. in July 2014 after a 24-year career there and after 12 years in previous writing and editing positions in private industry. Rabbi Saul's first pulpit was in Boardman, Ohio, serving for 3 years, and he is glad to be back in the congregation in which he and Phyllis have been members since 1978 and where he began teaching in 1975. Welcome, Rabbi Saul. Yaya is a spiritual seeker and co-host of Real Talk on God Talk, a podcast for people who skip church for brunch on Sundays. With her work, Yaya seeks to blur the lines between the secular and sacred in public discourse, helping people make meaning of their lives by exploring the unexpected ways spirituality is relevant to our everyday experiences. Yaya considers herself a religious non, the segment of American society that is religiously unaffiliated and one of the fastest growing groups according to the Pew Research Center. Yaya currently lives in Washington, D.C., is a former chaplain and holds an MDiv from Union Theological Seminary with a concentration on psychology and religion. Welcome, Yaya. And Reverend Clara L. Young, interim pastor at Greenbelt Community Church, United Church of Christ, was born in 1946. She graduated from Pfeiffer College, now university, with a bachelor's degree in Christian education, minoring in sociology. She graduated with an MDiv from the School of Divinity, Howard University in Washington, D.C., and was ordained in the Christian ministry in October 2000, and is an authorized minister in the United Church of Christ. The Reverend Young has spent her adult working career in the service of the church, first as a church educator, and she has served as a consultant in Christian education both privately and as a partner in education of the UCC. In addition, she was an Army wife. She is the wife of 52 years, mother of 2 children, grandmother of 3. She currently serves as transitional interim at Greenbelt Community Church, UCC, as that church engages in their search and call process for the next solo pastor. Welcome, Reverend Clara. And again, thank you all for being here. We're very excited about this conversation tonight.
Thank you, Kyla. I would also like to add my thanks for everybody coming out. I think this is important, and I think it's a very timely conversation to be having right now. When I heard about it from Kyla, coming from originally from Carol, this idea, I knew I had to help out with this one like I did with the one last year. And the reason is, I think there are a lot of people who are disheartened with the trajectory of our society and don't know what to do. And if you can do something, some grand gesture that will save the world, please do it. But if you can't think of that, maybe you can do something small. And maybe if enough people do small acts of kindness, it can make the world better in a big way. That's my hope. So my first question is the obvious one. And I'm going to ask for each of our panelists to answer this question. The question is, what does your faith or worldview tell you about the importance of performance of small acts of kindness? Dr. Sidhu, thanks.
Thank you for organizing this wonderful panel. And the question is that what does my faith teaches me about small act of kindness? The Sikh faith, there is a verse in our Holy Scripture that kindness is the son of faith. Daya Taram ka poot hai. That's the native verse of. So from the very beginning, when we are tuned into this thing that we are brought up in a Sikh faith, this is the first lesson which we learn. Be kind. If you have kindness, then faith will follow. And that faith will lead into courage. That thing will lead into determination. And then you are going to be the king of kings once you have established this role. And the other way around also, if you are a king with the determination and the courage, and you have faith, you can be kind. So that's the basic concept of Sikhi, which we follow. Act of kindness starts from the very beginning.
Sure, thank you. Thank you for organizing and for moderating. The Jewish tradition has a lot of things to say about kindness, starting with small acts, which we all can do, also moving to larger and larger acts of kindness. And I noticed that acts of inclusion and acts towards justice were included in the description for tonight's panel. And I think that's very important, because I think we are in a period where more of those acts will be needed. They will need to be overt. They will need to be offered on a day-to-day basis. We're in a very dangerous part of history right now. And if we keep some bedrock concepts. Judaism talks about everybody being created b'tselem Elohim, in the image of God. So if all of us are created in the divine image, such things as racism and misogyny should be impossible. If you believe that we are all created b'tselem Elohim, in the image of God, then we are all created b'tselem Elohim. And to have prejudice towards anybody would be ridiculous. So to be human is to be kind to each other. And if that one understanding came across it, from all religious traditions and from no religious tradition, it's the most important of human values, is that we have to be kind to each other. One of the, there's so many Jewish concepts tied in with kindness. There's chesed, translated as loving kindness, but it's really unearned love, because it's not transactional. Kindness and love is not transactional. There is the idea of rachmanut or rachamim, which means, again, compassion, related to the Hebrew word rechem, which means womb. We should treat each other as if we were all womb mates. I don't have a list, but it's womb mates. And so there are so many ideas that come from Jewish tradition. And if we would act on these in a universal kind of way, the world would be not as scary as it is now.
Good evening, everyone. Also, thank you for welcoming me into this space and for hosting. Like Kyla shared in my bio, I identify myself as a religious seeker, a religious nun, and a lot of you may have heard the term, spiritual, but not religious. I grew up in the Christian tradition, and I hold a lot of that still close to me, but in my life, in my journey, I decided to kind of let go of that. So to give you some context, the Pew Charitable Trust put out a report, I think in about maybe 2022, saying 28% of the US population right now refers to themselves as religious nuns. And of that 28%, there's a portion who are spiritual but not religious, and that spirituality, that seeking for understanding of what life is about. People are looking to make sense of everything that's happening, looking for those bigger things, transcendence, forgiveness, redemption, and organized religion and particular faiths, that's one entryway into it. But for those that aren't there, small acts of kindness, when we think about recognizing the humanity in someone else, taking a moment to not focus on ourselves the way that so much of society pushes us to do, but to see, the God in someone else and to recognize that and to say, you are worthy for a moment of my time. I think that is the gateway into those larger ideas, that is the bridge to that transcendence, those greater experiences that so many of us are seeking and don't know where to find in our society right now. So I think small acts of kindness, small is there, but they are what lead to those greater connections that are just really seem to be missing in a lot of our interactions.
And I want to thank all of you for coming. It's a wonderful group. And for you all who organized this. Coming out of the Christian tradition, we have some grounding with the Jewish tradition. So what Rabbi Saul said goes ditto. We are all in the image of God. God, love your neighbor. It is intertwined. Love as a self-giving love, not love as transactional. Love as, what do you wish the best for each of you is the way I am to relate to you and love you. That said, that's all, as I said Sunday morning, that sounds like a Hallmark movie. And in our tradition, we have these books in the beginning, they're called the Gospels. 3 of them can make you really uncomfortable. Because practicing the path that Jesus, that we pay attention to, is practicing a way of life. It's not what I believe, it's how I act, it's how I live. And our Gospels get real nitty gritty. So part of the tradition that I've inherited is, you know, when I was sick, you visited me. When I was lonely, you brought me a casserole. When I was in prison, you came to, you know, you did something about it. On, and somebody would say, well, but, we never saw anybody like that. And the scriptures turn it around and says, whenever you've done it, to the least of these, my brothers and sisters, you did it to me. Oh, yes, all right. It's a way of life. In the epistles, the letters that we have, be doers of the word and not hearers only. So it doesn't do any good to think about, for us, for me, as I've grown in faith, to think about the grandiose stuff. It's, how does that play out in practical things? And small acts or big acts, because wherever we are, we're placed to do the acts that we're placed before. And so some may be a senator or a representative or a person of power. You don't get by with a small act if you have the ability to make a difference. But their difference isn't any bigger than mine when I do something for somebody. They're all acts, their way of life. It's a pattern of being. And then our belief system says we believe, we have faith, because we've put it into action. Love as a hallmark moment, but love as putting into action of really just doing something when it's inconvenient, when we don't want to do it, when it's uncomfortable, when we'd rather go somewhere else. That's the small acts of kindness. That, David's obviously been listening to me, put together makes a big difference, because I think I've said that the past 2, possibly 3 Sundays.
Okay, thank you. That was the, I say this is the obvious question, but now I'm going to ask some variations. My next question is, if you're talking to someone who says they have no problem, they're all for performing small acts of kindness, but they struggle to do that with people who are not of their faith, or people who see the world in ways significantly different than they do, what would you say to a person who struggled with the problem of being motivated to perform small acts of kindness to people not of their faith, or who see the world differently?
This reminds me of every Zoom interaction we've had in the last several years. You're muted, right? I see those as 2 very different things. Interacting with people doing small acts of kindness for people who are not of your religion is immaterial. People are, as I said, everyone is human. We are all created in the image of God. You do kindness as kindness comes up, as the opportunity comes up. Doing kindness for people who you don't agree with can be a little bit trickier if they are actively in your face not agreeing with you. And that's the hard part, is that it's very hard to be loving towards somebody who I'm facing, against opposing rallies. Because although it is said the only way to conquer hate is with love, that's really hard to do on a day-to-day basis. In reality, first of all, you have to protect yourself and your loved ones against the hate that's coming at you. And then, over time, you hopefully find a way of having some ground, some meeting between, and it's something we have to strive toward, but it's very, very different than simply interacting, on an interfaith basis. That's easy.
I've been attending morning meditation mindfulness sessions on Instagram every Tuesday and Thursday. for the past couple of months with Pastor Mia McLean from Riverside Baptist Church in DC. And in the month of January, we've been doing a 28-day meditation on Reverend Howard Thurman's Meditations from the Heart. And one of his meditations talks about, he says, all judgment is God's judgment. All judgment, like we should reserve our judgment for God. That being, we don't have a clear understanding of the full situation, all the reasons why you should judge not, right? And I think when we kind of dig past the surface of why we might be unkind to those who are different than us, I think at the foundation of that is a judgment. If we want to talk about racial differences, you look at the other and there's a moral judgment that's made. Look at those people using our resources. Look at those people who aren't living their lives the way that I believe, or maybe my faith says that they ought to live their lives. And I think that there's a moment of self-reflection that people of faith can have, if you are of faith and you consciously want to do that, where you can say, I noticed myself being unkind in this moment to somebody that's different. And when you kind of scratch beyond the surface and you begin to uncover those judgments, and you can leave that on the altar, you can leave that with God and, do that inner work yourself, I think that there is a moment where you can kind of make room for the sunshine of kindness. It sounds so corny, but you can kind of make room for the sunshine of kindness to slowly but surely seep its way into your interactions more and more. And I think, I think it requires that self-reflection, and I think that we have to confront our urge to judge. Like, it's a natural human urge, an urge to judge, an urge to move with self-righteousness. But when we do that, I think it makes more and more space to see another person, say, okay, yes, you're different. I don't like what you're doing. I don't like how you talk. I don't like how you walk. But, both of our co-hosts up here said, if you believe that other people are made in the image of God and you truly would not want to dishonor or disrespect, your God, how can you dishonor or disrespect another person? So it takes time. I'm not trying to oversimplify, but I think that first level of self-reflection is really important.
For me, this is very easy because the concept of Sikhi is recognize everybody as one. The concept of oneness, regardless of what you are following, what walk of life you're coming from, what you're doing. If we can see beyond that we are all from one source, and that's the concept of Sikhi. But to get, like Rabbi said, that it's very difficult to practice in daily life, but I think if we can be a little more sensitive and pivot ourselves to see beyond, then we can achieve it. Small acts, maybe somebody confronted you. If you have protected yourself, then you can go beyond it. But again, practically it is difficult. To me, it comes easy because of the concept of the Sikhi. Our highest shrine, it has 4 doors to enter the central place. The reason, the concept is that 4 different directions, you come from whatever directions you meet, converge at one place. So that means everybody is honored, no matter what walk of life you're coming from, what your belief system is, so long you're recognizing the oneness that will lead you to act of kindness.
And there's a little bit about, we have the ability to make some choices. We can choose to hate back. We can choose to up the ante on every argument and not listen to anybody else. Possibly one of the largest acts of kindness that's small is choosing to listen, choosing to think, what is it that's causing you pain? How did we get to where we are? You may not have an answer. Thanksgiving meal or holiday may still be horrible. But by choosing not to escalate, by choosing to listen, you begin to find the places where you have shared conversation, that you each care about the welfare of children. You see things a bit differently, yeah. You each care for this, you each care for that. It's not a very visible act of kindness, listening, not reacting, keeping our mouth shut occasionally. But it is a small act of kindness because it helps bridge. And it's also a way of, an act of kindness that is resistance. There were those who would love to engage in us with all kinds of, you say this and that and the other thing, and you're this, that, and the other thing. By not engaging in that, you're not adding fuel to their fire of their opinions. It is an act of resistance to listen, to pay attention, and in the listening to view them as one, as image of God, as God within them. All these things that are shared among our religious attitudes on this panel. Sometimes we just have to be quiet.
I'm going to take you back a little bit to an old Warner Brothers cartoon I remember from watching when I was a kid. They were called the Goofy Gophers. Does anybody remember the Goofy Gophers? Their names were Mac and Tosh. And the cartoons always ended up being the same kind of thing. These two gophers would be running across a field, running away from a dog or a wolf or something, and they would get to their hole, and they would stop, and they would each stand on the other side of the hole. And the one would say, "After you." And the other would say, "No, after you. But I insist." And they would sit there, and my little 6-year-old brain was starting to, ready to explode, because like, just one of you jump in the hole. And they would go back and forth like that, and the dog's getting closer and closer and closer. And then finally they would agree to jump into the hole at exactly the same moment, because the hole was just wide enough apparently. They would jump at the same moment, they would fall down into the hole, and then just that next moment the dog would come zooming by and jaws snapping, and of course they would be safe. So now my question is, same as the first question I asked, but with a slight difference. What does your faith or worldview tell you about the importance of accepting small acts of kindness? Because that seems like that was the problem. They were both insisting on performing small acts of kindness. You first. And neither one was willing to accept it.
I think givers have a problem that they can't accept. And that is something which comes with time. If you tune yourself that you have to start accepting too. Giving all the time is easier, but when somebody is trying to help you, especially the giver, it becomes a problem. So I think it goes hand in hand. If you really want to polish yourself and be a soul that you can both be receiving and giving, that makes you a little bit at a different level so that you can see others. Acceptance comes when you receive. Giving is, we all can give, but sometimes I think it's a challenge. Personally, I started working on it to accept. And that has changed a lot in my life. That gives me a balance to see if I can give, I should be able to receive also. Because the other person who is trying to do something for me is coming out of kindness. That person is looking at that I also need something. So for me, not to block it, but to accept it, whatever act they are doing, helps me to polish myself and be more generous out in the society.
Reverend Clara?
Our teachings are a lot, within my faith tradition, a lot more about giving and servanthood and doing for others. But there are words that are stuck in there that we often jump over, and it really takes a little maturity on our part to realize that we can give. That word humility is within my faith tradition, and that's not a word that we like to think about too much. And yet it is in humility that we're not the most important thing in the world, and we can receive the gifts of others as well as we can give, although we often have the martyrdom complex that we have to always be out there doing the giving. So, we've got room. It's in there. We just got to pay attention occasionally.
So what comes to mind is that acceptance is also an act of kindness. Accepting the kindness of others is also an act of kindness, because you're really doing somebody else a favor by receiving and being thankful. And for those of you who have been ill before, had serious illness, that puts you in a place of receiving kindness on a daily basis, and sometimes for an extended period. And there's nothing that teaches you humility more than having to be on the receiving end of kindness and care. And it works on a theological level, I think. There's in Psalm 145, in part of a prayer that we call Ashrei, after the first that first word in the prayer, there's a verse, Poteach et yadecha u'maspia l'chol chai ratzon. You open, this is a prayer, a praise to God. We say, you open your hand and you satisfy every living thing with favor. And I didn't invent this. I saw this someplace and it stuck. Every time I say this, I say, Poteach et yadecha, so God opens God's hand, and I put my hands out like this. And the second part, it must be l'chol chai ratzon. You satisfy every living thing with favor. You have to have your hands open to receive God's favor. But then I always do like this at the end, because unless you are sharing the favor that you receive with others, what good is it? So that's a much harder question, Dave.
So often we are pushed into these binaries: good, bad, sacred, secular, giver, receiver. And in my faith expression, I think it's really grounded in collectivism, in sustainability, and as so many of our social services are being gutted, as so many institutions that we had come to rely on are kind of dissipating, this collectivism is moving on from just being like something that is aspirational to being something that I think we are all forced to participate in more and more. And to sustainably do that, you have to be able to receive. You have to be able to rest when you are tired. We cannot be simply reduced to what we can produce and what we can give to others. Like it's a both and, it's cyclical, give and receive, not give or receive. And so I would encourage someone that, may be a little resistant to being on the receiving end, if they have to think about it as being a model to others of how to be an ideal way to be in a collective society, trying to model receiving for others so that it can all work.
Well, I still have more questions, but I'm beginning to wonder if maybe anyone out there in the audience has any questions that they would like to ask. Kyla's going to come up.
Well, I have a question. Can I ask a question?
You can ask a question, sure, Kyla. And you can ask it directed, or you can ask it generally, or you can Anybody, if you can direct it, and then other people can answer.
Okay, I'll ask it generally, but if you don't answer fast enough, then I'll direct it. Does that sound good? Okay, so, I don't know if you've heard, but these are like kind of stressful times. I don't know if anyone's noticed that. So, at least for me, when I'm feeling stressed, like some of my colleagues on the back, they can tell you, when I'm feeling stressed, I'm just like, wait. That's actually me, we're live at work. And so what I'm wondering is, what do you do? And I just want to just acknowledge that I think for all of us, it's so easy to feel like it can be very difficult to dig deep. And so as we're feeling stressed and we're feeling mad and everyone out there is terrible, but luckily I'm great, how do we go through that to like really bring that energy? And I'm wondering if you can just kind of talk about the energy that is needed to dig deep, and when you walk into the grocery store and you're feeling really grumpy, to still do a small act such as just even smiling.
Right after November. And we were all feeling, a lot of us, I won't speak to all of you, were feeling a reasonable amount of stress. I went to get my hair cut. I had been getting my hair cut regularly, so I didn't have a long relationship with the beauty operator. In fact, I think she cut my hair twice. So, but we just saw each other, and that's where I've learned to do since then, is just to pay attention. It's like, how are you doing? And we each said, yeah. And suddenly there was this conversation that I did not know she was waiting to be able to tell somebody how she was feeling the stress. And she is from one of the South American countries. She has a family that's living here. There's her demographic and my demographic were not the same. But suddenly I slowed down enough to open my eyes and ears. And in that, by the end of the time, we gave each other a hug, which was the best hug I've had in years, because we needed each other at that moment. And at that moment, I knew we need each other in community, even people we don't normally talk to, associate with, but I may have my first interaction between the two of us, but we suddenly realize, because we're paying attention, we need each other. And so that then gave me strength for the next few days, weeks as as I am trying to lead this congregation. But slowing down to realize there are others, and we need each other, and it's right there at the edge of needing to say something to basically a total stranger and create a safe space. So that gave me energy to keep on keeping on.
I would add, so Kyla asked, what will give us the energy? And I'll speak for those who just might not have the energy or be even on the path towards renewal, that where that lack of energy lies, we might rely on courtesy. About a week ago, when, the federal enforcement, the ICE raids started ramping up, so much fear in various communities, especially the immigrant community. I had a contractor come to my apartment to fix the heat. This gentleman was clearly Latino, of Hispanic descent, and I just kind of wanted to, I felt like I should say something. He came into my personal space, into my home, and I just didn't know what to say. I felt like it would be awkward. I didn't know his status. I didn't know what to say. And so I offered him a cup of tea. And I usually don't offer people cups of tea when they come to fix things, but I just thought back to my grandma and what she would do, and that is something she would do. And I did not ask him about his status. I didn't ask him, how are you responding to the ICE raids? I didn't ask him anything. But in offering that, he was visibly surprised, but he accepted. And so, you talk about accepting people's kindness, like it's a mutuality type of thing. And that was a moment that I think for me was a really powerful point of connection with somebody I don't know. I probably never talk to him again. That we didn't talk about the politics of things, but there was just that shared humanity. And so I would say, sometimes we can just rely on courtesy.
I attend an interfaith church in Colombia. This is where I am from. And there is a large population of Latino, Hispanic background. Every Tuesday, I used to see like 500 plus people. This Tuesday, the past Tuesday, there were only 10 in that church, which was very heartbreaking. And I saw 2 of them walking out of the chapel. They had the scariest look on their face. They had language barrier. I just reached out to them. They were trying to ask me if I know, what's going on, why people are not there. Out of 500, only 10. But just to make that little bond of smiling, a gesture, just to say it's okay, you are here, I'm here. We can pray for those who are not here. Give them the courage to come back. It's okay. But that was the scariest thing I faced last week. But just interacting with those with the language barrier, just smiling, that put them at ease and myself at ease too.
Finding opportunities for recharging our own batteries is important and very difficult, because with all the fire hose of you-know-what coming at us, it's very hard to catch our breath. And we have to actively push back against the despair and depression that comes with the changes in society, and not lapse into this feeling of there's nothing we can do, because there's obviously things we can do. We can always work on the individual level. We can look to see who needs help right then, and by giving that help, we can recharge our own batteries. If you don't mind, I'll share a poem by Rich Orloff called Alice at 92. He's a contemporary Jewish poet whose material I use sometimes. So recently, my dear friend Alice, 92 and fading, complained to me about all the pains in her life, of which there are many. When she finished, she looked at me disappointed and sighed. I thought if I told you all of my pains, then I wouldn't feel them anymore. I told her that it didn't work that way. Her pains were real and made sense. Saying them aloud was better than squishing them, but not a magic pill to eliminate them. There is injustice in the world, and in each of our lives. I have given up the demand for life to be pain-free or fair. I acknowledge the blessings in my life, not as a form of yes but to pain, but as a form of yes and. I hold Alice's hand, and we allow the silence, appreciating our moment in the oasis before resuming the rough journey ahead. So I think if we use the opportunities to reach out to others, then we will be also helping ourselves and increasing that spark within each of us.
Let's talk for a moment about shopping carts. I have heard some people say that it's one of the fundamental tests of human decency to do something with your shopping cart once you've loaded your groceries in your car, and not just leave it in the parking lot. I have a couple of dings in the door of my car, and I think they're probably from being bumped by shopping carts that someone left in a parking lot. So I try to make a point. I don't just put away my shopping cart. When I get into the parking lot, if there's shopping carts around, I'll take at least one of them and put it in the corral before I go into the grocery store, and then I put my own away again when I'm done. The problem here is anonymity. There's nobody there to thank me for not leaving a shopping cart in the parking lot and dinging their car. Lenny Bruce had a comedy routine once about how, how the Lone Ranger never stayed around to be thanked? Well, once he was a little slow leaving, and somebody thanked him. And he said, wow, thank you, Masked Man. I'm gonna stay around, I'm gonna get a thank you, Masked Man every time. But the truth is that a lot of times, doing small acts of kindness are entirely anonymous, and there is absolutely no personal connection to be had in the process. So the question is, how do we keep motivated to perform small acts of kindness that have nobody saying thank you, no direct connection, you have no idea whose car you didn't ding because you put the shopping cart away? How can you stay motivated to keep doing small acts of kindness that are anonymous?
I think in my previous answer, I had the hints of this. Because if you're able to thank yourself for doing small acts of kindness, not by literally saying, thank you, that was a great thing you did, but to have that little lift, that little jolt of like, all right, then I think that's all we can, that's probably the best that we can get. It's probably, sometimes it's better than getting thanked externally, is to get reaffirmed in our beliefs.
So Kyla shared the title of my podcast, right? It's a Real Talk on God Talk, a podcast for people who skip church for brunch on Sundays. I'm one of those people. I haven't actively, gone to church in a really long time, but my prayer life is quite active. I'm often praying, and at the start of many of my prayers is a prayer of thanksgiving, whether that's, my morning prayers or even, gratitude for the food I'm eating if I say grace. And when you dig into that, if God and I are having a moment and we're really spending some time together, when I start to enumerate the things that I'm thankful for, it goes beyond the things that I can put a face to, like, thank you that you held the door open for me. Thank you that you provided this. When we start to think about where our food comes from, the countless producers, the farmers, the distributors, the truck drivers, every single person that has a hand in getting this meal to me, so many unseen. When I'm saying, thank you, God, for getting me home safely today, there's myself, there's the drivers I interacted with, and then there's the thousands of other drivers that are doing their part to make sure that I get home safely to my husband. And I think when I reflect on that, it becomes easier for me to be anonymous when I am just more aware of all the anonymous people that do their part to make sure that I'm okay. And so that's how I that's how I think about it, and I offer others to use that as motivation as well.
I'm of the belief that we do grow in faith and that we grow up in faith. And so as I've gotten older, and I'm now, as the phrase of my family is, I'm 80 adjacent, so I have grown up a little bit in the years. I've discovered it really can be less about me. I really don't have to pat myself on the shoulder every time I do something, but my faith compels me to do something. So if I see an injustice, like a shopping cart that's going to hit a car or cause an accident or slide into a child, and I don't do something, then that's on me too. But if I do it, I don't really get extra, backpacks. That's what you're supposed to do. That's the growing in faith. That's the growing in relationships with one another. That's the be doers of the word and not hearers only part that, makes us cringe when somebody like me says them from a pulpit or a lectern. But we can do things and begin to think less about, and then that becomes that self-giving love, because we aren't, I'm doing this because I love you. I'm just doing it because you need it to be done. And that's growing in faith. And that's a path, no matter which path we take, we're all can work towards. We're not doing it because of us. We're doing it because you need me to move that shopping cart, because otherwise you can't get in that place and you're, 9.5 months pregnant and really don't want to walk any further. We do it for each other without, and it's an attitude adjustment that is countercultural. It's counter everything that we get, but that's what faith is.
Me putting the shopping carts away is the act of mindfulness. That you are mindful, that you are acting there, putting the carts away to make it easier for the next person to be there. So those little things, you're not asking for anybody to pat you on the back. It's just something you feel like doing from within. And I think once you do that, you feel good about it. So mindful acts of kindness, that's what it is, just putting a card away for somebody else.
Thank you. Any other questions the audience has?
Good evening. Thank you all for being on the panel. My question is the challenge I'm finding now with children. How to, you can model, but I still find that there seems to be a gap in their wanting to take that chance to practice kindness. It's like, I don't know how to address it. I see it in my church, I see it with the students I teach, and you're kind of, okay, let's pay attention, let's do this because we care about one another, we're fellow students, this is our only planet. You try to think of things, but it's like there's a disconnect. How would you address that?
I will try to answer that question because children these days, they are truly disconnected. On Sunday, I was in my place of worship, which is called Gurdwara, as a Sikh temple, and we were holding this event, and kids were from Virginia, Maryland, and everywhere, and there was one counselor with the kids, those who were there. I think the kids which I saw, the children, those who were in church, kids are kids, they were making noises, when session was going on and we had to go and stop them. But I found an act there that one of the counselors, she told all the kids to put their phone in a basket. That way, their energy was directed to only one thing, and that is what is happening around them, and not putting their energy into the phones and being distracted. So I honestly really enjoyed that act which I saw yesterday. After about 2 hours, it was a long day yesterday, they were given the time with their phones. So I think keeping the balance between the two, allowing them and taking away from something from them, can help them grow and understand the difference, how to implement it when they are practically in a place where they need to behave in certain ways. And little acts like this can help them realize how to be more mindful. That's the best I can answer.
Teaching children is the biggest challenge, but it's also the greatest opportunity because they can learn and they absorb on a deeper level than adults. Once people are adults, trying to teach them the basics, if they don't have kindness down by the time they're whatever, it's a much harder project. But at the same time, children are naturally self-centered. And so you have to actively teach them. So using whatever techniques of teaching of teaching them kindness should be done actively, and it should be part of every curriculum. No matter what the subject is, that should be part of every curriculum.
Thinking about the youth, I always smile. I think, what's going on with the kids nowadays is an age-old question, so there's that. But however, the set of youth and young people in today's world, I myself try to just have a really empathetic frame, because the issues that they're dealing with right now, the climate crisis, disappearing institutions, rampant wealth inequality, there's just a stance of hopelessness that a lot of the youngest generations have, that, it can feel like it is something new, different, exasperated. And I think one of the joys of being a religious nun is that my secret text can be all types of texts. And so when I think about Bell Hooks' All About Love, she has a section in that where she talks about how our society really discounts children and does not recognize their humanity, like as individual agents. Like, yes, we're responsible for the young people, but they are people. And I think on a micro level in the home, I can't think of the big picture, but in the home, I think that there are ways in which we can not think of young people and kids as tools or agents to be controlled, or, sit down, be quiet, but really try to understand their inner lives a little bit more. And as we do that with them, that kind of is the model for how they can then relate to others. And it's hard, like the ways in which bullying is rampant and a thing in the schools, it's intense, and really different than when I was growing up, and I imagine some of you when you were growing up. But I think that there is, when we talk about those small acts of kindness, I think instilling that sense of worthiness and self efficacy, and like those things that parents can do with young people on a one-on-one, the hope is that you see the humanity in them, they replicate that outside, and it's tough, it really is.
No easy answers. But each child is a child of God, created in the image of God. And how we respect children, even though they, may make you crazy, and sometimes you just want to turn the volume down from the grandchildren, and you couldn't pay me enough to be a public school teacher, all of the above. They're wonderful to listen to when you break through that. There are things they need to say to us. And so it's a learning curve for them to figure out how to be grown up. It's a learning curve for us to figure out how to be with them. And it's a lot of work on both sides, but it's worth the work. They're not going to automatically fit all of the categories of this, that, or the other thing. It's mutual learning, and that means mutual respect. So you have to be worthy of respect too, as you also give respect. And slowly, surely, in the community, not discounting them, surrounding the community, that the community cares for them and the community wants them to be in a safe place. That begins to penetrate in spite of the conversation that comes out of their mouth. And that makes a big difference.
Yeah, I don't have a question, it's more of a comment, and it has to do with the shopping cart question. Because really, part of this is you're trying to answer the question of what do you do about the skeptic. And I will confess I'm a skeptic. But there's in other words, what difference does it make if I put away an extra shopping cart, really. And it's a good question, but it can be a little bit irrelevant. And I think there's an anecdote about two men who were walking along the beach, and they came to a place where there were all these starfish that were thrown up on the shore. And, just lots of them, hundreds of them. And the one man reaches down, picks up a starfish, and throws it back into the water. The other guy says, "What'd you do that for? How can that possibly make any difference?" The other guy says, "Made a difference to that one." And so I think that's the answer to the shopping cart question. There may be shopping carts all over the parking lot, but putting one away may make a difference to somebody.
This is kind of related to the shopping cart, taking a little bit farther. I would love for each one of you to address the issue of kindness in the midst of a lack of kindness, and also in the midst of unkindness.
There's a little bit of, you're responsible for yourself. So are you going to go and be unkind because someone's unkind? Or are you going to live to your values and be as kind as it is possible to be under difficult circumstances? We're not responsible for, we're responsible for our own actions. And we may or may not change somebody's opinion when they're being really, and there may be, we need to be able to separate ourselves in kindness. There's a quote that came from a UCC devotional a couple weeks ago by a minister. I never can pronounce his name. He's an interim minister up in, and he says, "Unnecessary truths spoken carelessly hurt. Necessary truths spoken with loving kindness heal." And so as we watch what we think and what we say, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of our heart, an old psalm, connect. Our responsibility, it seems to me, if we're speaking as people of faith, is how do we live on the kindness part? And it may be a necessary truth spoken carelessly hurt, but sometimes we speak necessary truths. But if we do it in loving kindness, there's a moment of healing in that may grow.
This is quite the question. I think the last time we saw this administration in power, Michelle Obama said, when they go low, we go high. Lately, on the internet, I've been seeing people say when they go low, we're taking it to the bottom. And I would offer that maybe neither of those options are the right option. When met with unkindness, and there are many different types of unkindness, like there's discourtesy, there's someone maybe hurting your feelings, there's feeling the brunt of racism, sexism, xenophobia. All these are different types of unkindnesses, and how I offer people to respond to them is different. But I try to remind myself that my job is to regulate my own world and express my connection with God out to the world. And so that means that if someone is meeting me with violence that is harming me, I have the right to defend myself. That's my belief. However, if there are words being exchanged and I'm not being harmed, my worldview says, well, I'm going to de-escalate. My worldview says, well, I will still give you courtesy because I'm the type of person. Like, I try to, in this type of moment, be really self-centered, to project out who I am, not who that other person sees me as, not whatever issues that other person is working out in their inner world, but truly to reflect my relationship with the divine. And I really, truly believe that you are the first to taste the poison that you dish out. before it hits somebody else's ears and hearts, it hits your own. And, stress kills. Bodily stress does actually hurt you. And so I'll admit, when I'm in traffic, sometimes I can get a little feisty, for lack of a better word. And there are moments where I am wanting to be really unkind in ways that's not how I would think, I would want to represent myself. And in moments when I'm met with unkindness out on the road, I try to remember that, one, I'm the one whose blood pressure is going up, and then two, ultimately this person who cut me off, this is somebody's parent, somebody's daughter, somebody's rabbi, pastor, who has to get back to their family. And so perhaps, although I'm met with unkindness, I can either ignore them or try to offer some kindness.
I hope I never cut you off in traffic. I want to acknowledge the pain that you brought up, because we're all humans. Everybody here has autonomic reactions, that they just arise from being human. And ultimately, we hope that we can get past that immediate response and go to a place of greater kindness. But it is painful, and we have to acknowledge that pain, because we definitely want to get to the ideals which my co-panelists spoke. But to get to that point is, give yourself a break. If you feel the anger, but don't act on the anger, and that's the hardest thing to do. It really is. And so we can only hope that eventually we will model a different kind of behavior, and so that hopefully people will learn from that. But it is striking us all the time. But I think one way of dealing it perhaps is to not desensitize, but to give ourselves less opportunities to be hurt, which sometimes I think means not being on social media as much, and spending more time listening to music, or enjoying nature, and not being plugged into the 24/7 news cycle, because that's just toxicity 101 right there. So I think the less we expose ourselves actively to unkindness, the easier it is.
In the Sikh faith, my brothers and sisters, because we look different, we face this unkindness a lot. I have in the audience, some of the members, they are here with their turban and the beard. Ask them what is unkindness. Ask them what they're facing. Ask them how they are reacting. So when I see this happening in everyday life, the core is that, I'm speaking on their behalf, that they first teach themselves to be calm and poised, because people are going to comment. You go out there with a different look, there will be racists out there. How do you prepare yourself stepping out of the home and in the world of unkindness towards you just because you look different and just because you follow a different faith? So I think what comes is that once we individually make ourselves strong, how to react when the situation comes up, that helps. So self-meditation, connecting to your own self, and bringing yourself to at a certain level that you can face it. And you can educate them instead of reacting to it or feeling down about it. There's an opportunity in everybody to go and be kind. So I think that it's a two-way traffic, to get hurt because of the racist remarks, just because of the looks, and then the person who is facing it, how they are responding back. So that comes from mindfulness and your own connection to your own faith and your own integrity. Thank you.
All of the panelists really, their responses made me a bit reflective. Many of our urges was to think about the ways in which those outside of our homes or like strangers are unkind, but so often unkindness finds its way into our relationships with people that we know and we love. And one thing that we might do is just practice a reframing and look at those moments of unkindness as an opportunity, like Dr. Sidhu said, as a way to practice our faith, as a way to practice our beliefs, as a way to practice in relationship. And unkindness and disconnection, that's a natural part of relationships. There's gonna be conflict, it's gonna come up. But when that does come up, especially with people we love, we trust, there's an opportunity to say, okay, this is a moment maybe to practice forgiveness. What does forgiveness mean to me? What does that really look like in practice? Okay, I'm gonna try, I'm really gonna try. And I think for me, that reframing has helped to, like the rabbi said, like, yes, I acknowledge I'm angry. I don't like that you are unkind to me, but I know that this is what my faith, my morals, my ethics tell me. Okay, I'm gonna practice, and so that's one thing I try.
Okay, we're getting on toward the end of our program. I do have one more question I think is important. We've talked about shopping carts, and I've talked about how people have said, rather in a light tone, I guess, that what you do with shopping carts is a fundamental test of your humanity. Other people have said, and I think on a more serious note, that empathy is the thing that makes a person a good human being, and makes it possible for us to live as a society. So my last question is, what is the role of empathy in your faith, and how does it relate to the capacity for people to engage in acts of kindness?
I think this goes back to the circle from where we started. So, the empathy, like I said, is the son of faith, and the courage. If you have empathy, you will go out and do acts of kindness. And without that, your faith will not prevail. You won't get the strength to do it. So in my faith, it's very clear that the very first lesson which we learn is empathy. And then everything will follow. That is the very basic lesson which I have learned in Sikh faith, empathy.
I think empathy is baked in to not only Judaism, Christianity, Sikh, and I think it's all, quote, good religion is based on empathy. And when people are representing themselves as religious in any way and are not being empathetic, then I think you have to doubt their religiosity, and even whether they're representing their religion at all, because the truest model of any true religion is empathy towards others, because as I said in my first answer, there really aren't others. There's me, and then there's everyone outside of me. But if I'm perfecting my own self, then I'm able to help everybody around me. So empathy is, I think, the very key to all of this.
I think my expression of faith really begs the question of how far outside of myself, my family, my nation, my neighborhood, how far can I extend myself to be a representative of divine love? And I think when, David, when you ask about empathy, in name, you can say, I'm an empathetic person, I care about people, but when that person is really different than what you're used to, when that person is a criminal, when that person is making choices that you fundamentally disagree with, how much can we step into the discomfort with the faith of knowing that we are aligned with our ethics, with, you know, what we truly believe. And so I just encourage folks to think about empathy and then take it a step further. And I think that that's really what my faith is telling me.
Well, I think at the beginning, love God with all your heart and soul and mind, that we inherited from our Jewish tradition friends, and your neighbor as yourself, and that love your neighbor as yourself is on almost all of the major world religions for millennia. So there's something about ancient wisdom and universal wisdom of that we are to live in a relationship with others as we live with ourselves, which is that empathy. And that it isn't easy. It's always putting yourself, you know, paying attention to yourself, but also paying attention to everybody else. And the choice is, you don't need to be a person of faith. You just say, you know, chuck it all and do whatever. I can't make that choice because I made another choice a long time ago, and I can't give up the choice I made to be a woman of faith. And therefore, as a woman of faith, I love God with all my heart, soul, and mind, and I try to love, do whatever, give it my best shot on some days, other people, trying to bridge that as I would want to be cared for and loved. To see the light in others, to see the light in all living things, and to recognize that light in all living things.
So I do want to actually say something about the shopping cart, if I could. I have the bike, so I'm going to do it. Which is one of the things that I think about, and maybe I'm different than everybody here, but I'm a little selfish, actually. And so one of the reasons why I like to put away the shopping cart is because I just feel good. You know, and I think this is one of the amazing things about small acts of kindness. It's true that you know, if I do something nice for Naomi, hopefully Naomi has a better day, and maybe she goes and there's a little tiny ripple effect out there in the world. I hope so. But one of the things that happens if I do something nice for Naomi is I feel good, which means the next time I see Dave, hopefully, I'm a little brighter because I had this. And so I think there's a real contagion element to small acts of kindness that I hope we can remember when we were out there feeling, you know, some of these, you know, the way that we're all feeling right now, maybe a little frustrated, a little down. I want to just acknowledge the fact that like over 75 people came out tonight to talk about small acts of kindness. What does that tell you? So thank all of you for being interested and engaged and being here and taking even and being with us. And David, you are amazing. Thank you so much, David. And to our panelists, Dr. Sidhu, Rabbi Saul, Yaya, Reverend Clara, thank you all for your wisdom and your time.